Welcome to Gardens of Earthly Delight, the podcast dedicated to exploring our connection to Earth. I'm Andrew Valenti, and I'll be your host and guide. Welcome to episode 6 with Sophie Strand. Sophie is a writer and author of The Flowering Wand, Rewilding the Sacred Masculine, The Madonna Secret, and her most recent book, a memoir called The Body is a Doorway. She lives in the Hudson Valley in upstate New York, where she writes about mythology, ecology, and the intersection between storytelling and the more than human world. This conversation spans a lot of ground. We talk about the differences of being from and of a place, what Lord of the Rings has to teach us about ecology, communicating with plants through dreams, the problems with how we use psychedelics, making good soil as both metaphor and practice, and how her experience with chronic illness has deepened her relationship with the natural world. A brief note on this episode: this conversation includes some discussion of drug use and psychedelics in the context of plant medicine and healing.
To tell you about my relationship with this land here, well, I was actually born in the city and moved up when I was a little bit older than 3. So I actually have urban origins, and was introduced to upstate when I had already kind of, concretized as a human being. And in a lot of ways, my early experience in the city was pretty traumatic. And I experienced some early childhood violence and trauma. And so coming to the Hudson Valley, even at that young age, felt like being saved. Like it felt like a place that was big and old enough to hold things that normal human value dualisms could not hold, were not robust enough, that I had seen things that were so horrible that I had no way of making sense of them. But the Hudson Valley has known giant glaciers. It has known ice ages. It has known fires. It has known genocide at the hands of the Dutch, killing off almost all of the Munsee people. Like, this is a landscape that knows how to hold harm and how to change it into bluestone and to build an entire mountain range out of it, how to let itself be triturated down and alchemized. And so this land for me has been big enough, old enough, and wise enough for me to be able to move through things that are part of my origin story that are really, really hard. I think of our bodies as being kind of fictional, that we're actually much more porous and extended than we believe. Self is only self through other. Our cells change over every 7 years. We are rebuilt materially and metabolically by the food we eat, the air we breathe, the relationships we tend. And so I am built by this valley, and my brain extends into it. My mind is bigger than my skin silhouette. I think with all of my relations, with the honey fungi, with the mountains, Overlook Mountain, with the black bears, the chanterelles, the mugwort, even the invasive species, the spongy moths, that these are beings that, when I pray, I don't pray to saints or gods. I pray to the beings that really will show up at a pivotal moment. The heron that really does fly overhead when I'm looking for some kind of sign and clarity. And so, this landscape has been my savior. It has built my body. It is my body. It is my brain, my extended mind. It's kept me alive. It is my primary relationship. And anything that I do must nourish it. Whenever I make work, creative work, I think it has to feed the land from which it sprouted. Like, there's this work that I'm creating has to honor the multi-species polyphony of the Hudson Valley in some way, and honor that although I am, in human words, telling this story, the story comes from underneath my feet. What is your relationship like with rootedness, given that you are a transplant to a newer place?
Yeah, I've been on that journey for a while now. Since leaving the United States, it's been a huge question in my mind. What does what does being from a place really mean? Because especially being an American.
I know.
And so I went on this ancestral journey. So I moved to Europe because I got my dual citizenship in Italy through my great-grandfather. And that just got me thinking about place, because when I arrived to Italy, the land doesn't speak to me. And places that I had never been, the land speaks to me a lot more. And places like the UK, like Ireland, like Scotland, I'm in Wales now, the land speaks to me. And I have some ancestry from here, but I also don't feel like this is my home. So I don't feel like anywhere is really quite home in a way. So I like to connect as much with the earth wherever I am to understand what that home is. And it's different languages everywhere you go, which is amazing. Not just Italian or French or whatever. It's the land itself speaks different languages through the quality of the soil, through the birds, the bird song. You know, one thing I miss about living in the United States, or at least on the East Coast, are the chickadees and the cardinals. It's a whole different ballpark of birds over here. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on being of a place rather than being in a place.
That's a beautiful question. Well, first, I'll also just say that I don't ever love to fetishize some fictional idea of rootedness or belonging or kinship with place that human beings in our original, 90,000 years of existence before we started to create civilization and sedentary communities, were peripatetic. We were wanderers. We were vagabonds of the earth. And we were always following weather systems, warm weather, different species, food we could forage, that we lived in our footsteps, on our feet, moving. And so I do think this idea of rootedness and belonging and having a certain place where you live is in a lot of ways a modern fiction. That doesn't mean it can't be done well and can't be done more sustainably. I don't think there's any way back to Eden, back to the garden. But I do always want to question or trouble the idea of what home is for a human being. That home is the way in which we are in lovership and responsibility with the beings around us at any moment in time. It's a way of relating for me rather than a place or any kind of ownership. Home is a kind of hospitality with which you welcome other beings into your abundance and also step really, really politely into their lives and their worlds. And so for me, rootedness and home is about a kind of behavior of relationality and understanding that our actions implicate more than just us. And that oftentimes when we do harm, that when we shoot an arrow of harm out into our wider ecosystem, it has a long arc of coming back and coming into our own breast and harming us as well. And that if we recognize that we are entangled beings who are created through relationship, it makes us a lot more responsible. So for me, home and belonging have a lot to do with that kind of inner hearth of hospitality and decorum, interspecies decorum.
The only times that I've felt jealous of and I'm going to use the word jealous because when I went to Sardinia, it is an ancient tradition there of people. People have been there for a very long time. And there's a traditional throat singing from Sardinia. And I'm not even sure they know how far it goes back.
Yeah.
But it's only passed down from father to son. It's only men that sing.
Yeah.
And it's just the only people that have kept this on is from the father, bringing it to his son. And I found myself being really jealous of that because sometimes it's like you can be born into something and your life is mapped out for you. It's like,
Yeah.
this is really important for you to continue this tradition, to learn how to sing this way, to have a son and pass it down to him. But then I also battled that jealousy. It's like, well, actually, I'm freedom to do whatever I want is pretty nice. But then that also feels overwhelming to the point where it's like, well, what do I want to do? What am I going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think also that's predates even human beings, is there are long periods of stability and evolutionary inheritance of beings passing along certain traits and certain behaviors and ways of surviving. And then without fail, there's an extinction event, or there's a climatological shift, and there's an interruption in inheritances and rituals and ways of surviving. And I think that we're at this patchy moment where apocalypse and collapse are not distributed equally. So there's still pockets of people who have their rituals, their understandings, their principles, culture, intact culture. And then there are a lot of us who are already part of the interruption, where we don't know yet how to survive in this new ecosystem, this new climate.
And you talked about that in The Flowering Wand. What's the word I'm looking for? It's the Tolkien word.
Eucatastrophe.
Eucatastrophe. That was a new word for me.
Me too. And I heard of it. I was like, wow. Yeah, eucatastrophe would be, the lucky disaster, the escape that still fits in with the natural order of things. I really love it, especially as a fiction writer who doesn't want to give. Do you know about the idea of plot armor?
No.
Tell me. It's super interesting. It's how you have a character and somehow they always escape and they always get out. And it doesn't make sense. It actually kind of violates the natural order or logic of your universe. And a lot of fantasy and heroes' journeys operate with a kind of plot armor. And I always think it's more interesting to have, if your character's going to escape or going to survive a really horrible thing, really think about the logic of it. Think about the ecological practicalities of how it might actually happen.
Can you explain for people who haven't heard Eucatastrophe what that is?
Yeah, it was a term coined by Tolkien, and especially I think in his letters to C.S. Lewis, who he had a close friendship with. And of course, it has a slightly Christian bent to it in these two Christians' conversations. But, as a gifted storyteller, we can expand it beyond that simplistic paradigm, which is this idea of the happy disaster, which is something that happens that is totally unexpected and happens the last possible instant where you utterly know that you could have died. And I think he describes it as like joy polished by the absolute certainty that the other thing could have happened, that you could have died. And so it very much depends on and is created by the direness and the sobriety of looking at how bad things are. And also, I think for me, Eucatastrophe very much is about understanding that we are not rugged individuals and that being saved is always interrelational. It's about a kind of humility that you couldn't save yourself. Something else had to help you. It's communal. And it's about surrender to the wildness of the world, the unpredictability of these things. And so Eucatastrophe for me is something that destroys your sense of self, your sense of self-preservation, your ingenuity, but also saves you and is polished by and brought into focus by how many times other beings are not saved and how many other experiences where no one shows up. So it very much understands how unlikely it is that we are actually saved at the last possible minute. And of course, the example is the golden eagles flying out of the sky and saving Frodo and Sam from Mount Doom at the end of Lord of the Rings. And the thing about that is it doesn't rely on this older trope, which is Deus ex machina, which is like God from the machine, God from the sky, which is a violation in the natural order, which is a god shows up, magic suddenly happens, like something happens that you have no explanation for, and you're saved. with a eucatastrophe, it has to be the eagles that live in this world. It has to be an element of the actual order of this world that saves you. And so these eagles come in and save Frodo and Sam at the last possible minute. So that's a wonderful example of it.
And a wonderful example of plot armor, because even if, Frodo and Sam had perished there, they still threw their ring in the fire and the world was saved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. I mean, Tolkien does some really interesting stuff with heroes also, that everybody is pretty fallible in his stories ultimately, that no one really is carrying the ring by themselves. So I always appreciate that.
I haven't read the books. I saw the films. I was like peak prime time of my life. I was in high school.
Yeah.
The years that the movies came out.
I love them so much. Yeah.
But after listening, I listened to your book, and I loved it.
Thank you.
And hearing about the character that was left out of the films.
Yeah.
And hearing you talk about this character, I was like, oh, that's actually the most important character. Can you just talk a little bit about this? I wasn't planning on talking about Lord of the Rings, but
Lord of the Rings, yeah.
But I think this character, and I can't even remember their name, but
Tom Bombadil.
And from an ecological standpoint, this seems like such a great lesson for humanity right now.
Tom Bombadil, for a lot of like real hardcore Lord of the Rings fans, is this kind of anomaly in the Lord of the Rings. And so many people tried to press Tolkien to explain what this character was and why they were in the story when they didn't seem to further the plot in any kind of way. They weren't like integral to the story. And Tolkien gave so many answers that it's basically no answer. And Tom Bombadil is this kind of very capricious, funny, jolly, almost like Santa Claus-like character who sings and dances and can tame the trees and is kind of lord of the forest. And he has Goldberry, his magical wife, and they have this magical abode in the forest. And they provide safe haven and save the hobbits at the very beginning of the Fellowship when they just begin their journey. And they're not tired out yet. They're not bedraggled. They're not defeated. But he gives them this experience of safe haven and this kind of like this break from the fight between good and evil. Tom Bombadil we are told that he predates even like the first raindrop or the first acorn, that he's almost in some ways, some people have this conspiracy theory that he is Elevatar. He is like the singing god that creates the Middle Earth itself. Tolkien said that wasn't true. There's a lot to discount it, but he does seem to predate petty human concerns. The ring doesn't affect him because he doesn't even want power. He doesn't need power. He's not about acquisition or accumulation of orcs or hobbits or animals, agriculture and mastery. He is lord of the forest, not because he owns these animals and these beings, but because he knows how to sing to them. He knows their language and their song. And so for me, Tom Bombadil is really this reminder that we are part of this story that predates our ideas of morality, of right and wrong, that predates our idea that we are this prized species that's better optimized and more conscious than other beings. We're actually part of a many billions long year experiment in aliveness, of which we're probably just a blip. And so for me, Tom Bombadil is always this reminder that, first of all, mastery is not about accumulation or dominance. It's about communication and play and reverence and care and hospitality, welcoming the hobbits into your house, making them food, taking care of them. And it's also about understanding that this story is so much longer and bigger than what we think are the big battles between right and wrong.
And a good reminder that plants and soil it's speaking to us
always. We just need to learn how to listen.
Mm-hmm. And we have that in us too.
Oh yeah.
And now it's an exciting time to be alive because people are proving that they can hear these plants. and it's coming out. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but I recently heard you on an episode of the Telepathy Tapes podcast, which is completely rocked my world.
Yeah, it's
listening to that.
mind-blowing.
It's world changing, completely world changing. But there are non-speaking autistic people who communicate with plants. And it's the most beautiful, incredible thing that I think I've ever heard, is hearing these stories from these people.
I mean, it's not just autistic non-speaking individuals. I mean, my herbal teacher was speaking with plants, and she encouraged us. One of her first teachings she gave us was that she said, before you look a plant, when you're sitting with a plant and meditating with it and getting to know it locally, don't look it up. Don't look up its properties. Ask it for a dream. Ask it to communicate with you and make notes of what it tells you. And then go and research and come to me and ask. And there were so many times when the apprentices and the other people who were studying with her, including me, would have a dream, and then we would receive a communication. And then we would go and it would be totally right. Like, I had a dream about nettles, that nettles would help save me with my kidney. I was in renal, pretty much renal failure. And I had a dream about nettles, and they came to me and I used them. And then I learned after the fact that they're diuretics and oftentimes used for kidney issues, and inflammatory problems with histamine-related causes, which is what was causing these kidney issues. So for me, like, I think we all have the capability of doing it. So many indigenous traditions know that it just takes humility and widening our epistemological frame. So, like, widening the ways in which we think that knowledge arrives.
That leads me to the question of dreams, because it's such a fascinating place that we exist in.
Yeah.
Every night. Where do you think these messages come from? Is it from your subconscious body knowing? Is your body know that it needs nettle? Or is it that we're existing in this place where we can freely communicate with plants? Like, is it actually nettle? Or is it another thing coming in to say it's nettle? What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think that individual minds exist. I think that our brains are probably more like radio receptors than they are actual thinking, thought producing engines. That's definitely like a perspective right now in consciousness studies that is gaining more and more prevalence from even like the most mechanistic material reductionist scientists, that thinking doesn't necessarily happen in the brain, but the brain facilitates it, like picks up on it. And so for me, in my life, I've had experiences enough with dreams, with intuition, whereby I think cognition is leaky. I am in a mind that's bigger than me. I am being thought by, sung by, dreamed by other beings who need me. And who I think oftentimes our dreams can be psychological, and they can be very personal, and they can be a time when we get quiet enough to hear our intuition. So yeah, I think there are many different types of dreams, which in the ancient world, people knew that. People knew that there were psychological dreams, there were petty dreams, there were anxiety dreams, there are healing dreams. I mean, one of my favorite ideas that you see pop up all over the Mediterranean basin and all over the world, but I'll focus on the Mediterranean basin, and is this idea that dreams come from a place and you're like the radio picking them up. And if you are ill or sick or suffering, you'll go to a place to receive a dream. So with Asclepius, there was this idea that there were these certain temples where you would go to do dream incubation to receive a dream from that place, from the medicine of that place, that would tell you what you needed to heal yourself. And for me, I've noticed that, I've traveled, and when I've traveled, I've had dreams in those places that were so weird and so outside of my regular assemblage of associations that it's hard for me to think about my brain as having made that up. But of course, I'm always, I have a very I always try and hold the possibility of being wrong and of wanting to accept new information and update my perspective. I think dreams are a black box. They're weird. And they're obviously very important. If people stop dreaming, they die. Like if we stop doing deep REM sleep, if we stop having these dreams, our cognitive health declines rapidly. There've been lots of like scientific books written about this. We don't quite understand what they're doing. We know that if we have someone memorize something and then we let them sleep and they go into REM sleep and they dream, they remember something much better or integrate it much better. We're doing some kind of cognitive work in dreaming that is very important to our survival, but we don't understand it completely. And I love it. I love a good mystery. What have you told me you had an experience with dreams and plants. I'm really curious to hear about it.
I was trying to remember when this happened. At one point, mangosteen came to me in a dream.
I don't know mangosteen, so introduce me.
Neither did I. And, you know, to be honest, I could not tell you to this day because this was many years ago now. Yeah. I just woke up with the word mangosteen. It's right there. And so I looked it up and went and got some mangosteen juice. I was able to find some juice of mangosteen.
Wow.
And I just drank it. I was like, okay, I think I'm supposed to have this. But my wife is very tapped in. She does a lot of dream work. She mostly from a Jungian perspective.
Yeah.
So my world has been completely rocked for the past several years since diving into dream world. But she gets a lot of herbs and plants in her dreams as well, because she also has dealt with mysterious health issues and will just ask for a dream. And the most recent one was artichoke just came, and looking at the properties of artichoke and things that she's been going on, it made perfect sense. And so she's been taking a tincture and been feeling better. So it's amazing.
I mean, for me, I had this period in my life where I was dreaming about mushrooms all the time and fungi. I mean, I had a very deep relationship with fungi and mycorrhizal fungi, but there was a period in 2021, 2020, where they were just coming to me, different mushrooms every night. And I just started to just like feel like I was possessed by them, that they were like trying to poke me and tell me what to do. And my life did rapidly change when I started to kind of invite them in to collaborate with me. So, yeah.
Well, I have a quote of yours written down right next to me. It says that you describe yourself as an instrument being played by microbes, by yeasts, by fungi, by other people.
Yeah, totally. Feels accurate.
It is. I mean, and I think the easiest one is by other people. I think we have the power to completely dictate the way that somebody else is.
I know. It's powerful and also big responsibility. And right now, so many of us are living out stories that were not written by us, that we are not the authors of, that we have become the instruments and narratives that we don't necessarily want to live and die within. So that's an important thing to remember.
I like the idea of having trees and fungi. Fungi, do you pronounce it fungi or fungi?
You know, one of my closest friends and an amazing writer, Patricia Cashian, says she's a mycologist. She says you can pronounce it fungi or fungi, and both are correct. So I trust her.
I find myself just pronouncing it both ways in the same conversation.
Both are correct. However you feel compelled.
Okay. Well, actually, that brings me to something else. So this is also from The Flowering Wand, your book. And here's another quote that I'm going to read because it's about names. So here's the quote, if you don't mind me reading this out loud.
Go for it.
What we name, we often feel we own. What we name, we feel we understand well enough to name. And when we believe we have arrived at understanding, we stop asking questions. Now, you were referencing Adam naming Eve in this quote. But this made me think of the names that we give to plants and animals. And
I was actually referencing Adam naming all the plants and animals.
And all the animals. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so sometimes I feel guilty for not knowing the name of a plant or an animal. or a tree. And so I'm curious for you to talk about the juxtaposition of naming something for ownership, but also naming something for respect. Because when I feel guilty, I feel like I'm not respecting the thing because I don't know its name. But then naming also.
I think so. I'm very curious in the history of oral culture shifting over to textual chirographic culture. So when we transmitted knowledge through storytelling, and then when we started writing things down with alphabets and language and books, and how that actually facilitates a complete cognitive shift and makes certain types of thinking possible and closes down other types of thinking. And for me, one thing I'm very interested in is how when we start writing things down on a piece of paper, abstracting a word from the thing it represents, we start thinking we can own objects and people and animals and places. And that from most of human history, in oral cultures, knowledge is relational. It's born in boats of breath. It has to be resurrected in community every time you speak it or sing it or recite it. That a word is an event. It's a verb. It's built of breath. It passes into relationship. But then with the advent of the alphabet and writing, a word is something that doesn't change, that doesn't respond, that is static, that is pinned to a page that we can own and accumulate. And so I'm really curious about how we shift into cultures of accumulation and domination, and how we can look at technology, material culture as informing that paradigm shift. And so for me, a name can be a way of creating intimacy. That in fairy tales, when something tells you its true name, it gives you power. It gives, it can oftentimes, Isis tricks Ra into giving her his true name. And then Isis has more power. And in fairy tales, oftentimes, if a fairy tells you their true name, you have power over them. Or you have relationship, you've built relationship. And so I think naming can be very, very intimate and very powerful. But the way that I would say Euro-patriarchal culture, so that I don't want to generalize to all human beings, but like a type of epistemological frame, a type of culture and way of knowing frames naming is as accumulation and ownership. That when you name something, you own it. That if you can write the name down on a piece of paper, you can say, if you name a piece of land, you own it. If you can name that animal, you own it. And that's what I kind of want to complicate. And I also think that there's a way in which we like to accumulate data and information without building relationship. Like I always say that we have encyclopedias and not ecologies. That in oral cultures, you oftentimes see much smaller vocabularies, which we could, of course, classify as primitive. But those are words with real gold backing behind them. Each word in that culture has a real relationship, a real roots, like it means something. So many of the words that we have today are abstract. They've been colonized from other cultures. They don't mean anything. They're empty. And I think for me, I want words that have gold backing, that have real relationships behind them. And so if I name something, I want it to be, or if I know the name of something, I should be in relationship with it. So that's the way I've been thinking about it in my own life.
The Never-Ending Story came to mind.
I have never seen The Never-Ending Story.
Well,
yeah.
To not give it away, there's this world that exists within this book. And it's being it's being destroyed by something, I think it's called the Nothing. And so this world is continually just being destroyed by blackness. It's just disappearing. And the only way for it to be saved at the end is for the reader of the book to name the princess of who rules over this land. It's a great movie.
Well, there's power in that. It's also like, so many prayers are just recitations of the names of ancestors. And, when a name drops out of existence, or when we stop knowing the names of things, we stop caring about them. And I do think, I love the book Landmarks by Robert McFarlane, where he makes the argument that there are so many like local words that change like just a town over to describe certain weather phenomenon, certain types of plants, certain season words that are passing out of existence. And that when those words stop being used, we stop actually protecting what they denote. And so I do think like keeping the names alive, like the folk names, not the Linnaean taxonomical science names, not the correct names, but the intimate folkloric names is a way of keeping alive our desire to fight for and protect other species, plants, places.
You know, I had another conversation. Actually, by the time this podcast comes out, this podcast that I'm talking about is going to be out. It's coming out this week. But I had a conversation with a Hopi farmer, and he was explaining the Hopi language. It's called Hopi Levi. And he was explaining to me that they don't speak in past or future tense. They only have words for present tense. And I just thought that was so interesting and so fascinating. It gives a whole new meaning to be here now, in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, so many different cultures have different ideas of temporality and time. I'm so curious about time as being a cognitive, like a frame rather than a reality. Yeah. There's a great like speculative fiction book called Time and Again, where like the CIA has this project where it understands that time is just a frame of mind. And they teach this guy how to shift his consciousness back. They put him in the Dakota in New York City, and it doesn't work. But he has like, they've put him in all this like 1800s clothing. All he's seeing is stuff from that time period. And I think that if he can really shift his frame of mind, he'll time travel. And it doesn't work. And then one night he goes out for a walk in the snow and he's like very defeated. And then like a horse and buggy goes by. But it's a great idea that like time isn't so much like there isn't a past, a present, and a future. All time is happening at once. And our brain is what is deciding that this is the now, right now.
And that comes back to language, because to bring it back to telepathic communication, it's often described as wordless. And we've had trouble describing how that communication actually comes across. It's more of a feeling or a texture or a sound or a color or something like that. So that it makes me think about how we limit our perception of things by giving it a name, because we're not allowing us to experience the other way that things are communicating with us.
Yeah, we can't explain certain things. It doesn't mean they're not happening. And they're not, we think that the word only speaks in human words, but it oftentimes speaks through, if a microbe is trying to communicate with us, it gives us a fever, or it makes us drunk when we drink, yeasty beer. Like feelings, consciousness states, things that defy language and explanation are very real. But it's why I'm very skeptical of modern psychedelic optimism and culture. And I always say I'm a psychedelic conservative. Like, I think they're very useful and very interesting, but I do think that we have plunged into them in a way where we do them a disservice, and we do ourselves a disservice. And I think that the rush to explain the experiences we have in psychedelic states oftentimes undoes them. James Hillman, who is a wonderful mythopoetic thinker and philosopher, oftentimes said, don't talk about the dream. The dream was the work. Having the dream was the dream work. And I don't necessarily agree with that at all, but I do think it's interesting, which is like, it's not about figuring it out or explaining it or pulling it apart and understanding. Just having the experience itself, just the feelings that moved through you, is the work.
I'm curious to get some of your perspectives on psychedelics, natural plant psychedelics. Now, I have some personally strong opinions, having come out of
I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear.
Well, when I was younger, I abused marijuana to the point where I do not use it anymore.
Same.
And good for you.
Yeah.
And so it was a point where, as I was stopping using marijuana, it was becoming more and more accepted into the culture and legal. And my perception of it is it has kind of, I see an energy around it. And I've heard from Reiki masters who can see auras that marijuana will make your aura disappear, or it'll dim it. And I've also had other experiences with psychedelics where there was a definitive last time, because something came to me and told me this will be the last time, or else if you do this again, you're not allowed to go back. Meaning I'm not allowed to go back to reality after the psychedelic experience. Yeah. And so now that it's becoming more accepted, even psilocybin mushrooms are becoming more accepted as a mode of healing. And I also hold the concept that it can be a very healing thing. Even marijuana, I think these are powerful plant medicines, but they've just been misused. So, yes. Well, tell me your thoughts on
tons of thoughts. I really resonate with everything you're saying. I'll start by talking about this idea of Pharmacon. Do you know about the idea of Pharmacon?
No, but I can imagine. Tell me what it is.
It's this Greek concept, which is that it denotes both a potion and a poison. It's a substance that, depending on dosage, can do either. And in a lot of ancient cultures, you don't have the word for poison. You have a word like pharmacon that denotes potency, powerful, power. And I oftentimes think that in most cultures up to the modern age, there's an understanding of dosage, that anything at a small enough amount can produce some kind of effect that could be positive once or twice. But you got to be real careful, and you got to be in relationship with that plant, and you got to be humble. And at any higher dose becomes a poison. So a pharmacon is a potion, and potion and poison are these kind of doublet words that end up meaning similar things. And for me, you only need a word like poison in a culture that doesn't know how to do dosage, that wants everything all the time. So you need to say, that's really powerful. You can't eat 100 of them, because we don't understand how to dose anything. We do everything at a heroic dose level. We also, we want the biggest, loudest, most traumatic impact experience from everything, which means we turn everything into a poison. Like anything you can be addicted to anything in this culture. Really, like our culture says, turn this into an addiction. Anything.
I'm fully addicted to coffee.
Me too. Or addicted to our phone, addicted to relationships, addicted to anything. Like we live in a culture that does not tell us how to be satisfied and how to get in touch with our bodies and our actual needs, that removes us from the web of nourishment that would keep us in equilibrium. And I think that, so you have this culture that is deeply appetitive, where its desire has been just like abstracted from the kind of protections of community. And so you have like a very highly addictive, a culture of addiction. I think our culture is a culture of addiction, and that doesn't understand dosage. And then you also have a culture of individualistic, capitalistic healing. So that wellness is a product that you can only afford and buy if you ascend to the financial prosperity whereby you can afford the trip to Mexico to take ayahuasca. And your healing isn't for your community. It's not for the individual. It's for you. And if you're not healing, you haven't done enough work and you haven't made enough money to afford the healing. So this idea is called healthism, which is that health is a reflection of your work and your worth. And that if someone's sick, it's not because of this complex web of oppression and pollution and genocide and all of these things. It's because you're a failure and you need to work harder. And I think this idea that taking a psychedelic for your own personal healing, especially a psychedelic that was grown in a country that your country colonized a country away, it's going to make you more medicinal to your community. I'm very skeptical of taking plants that are not grown where you live to have a psychedelic experience. I think that, you know, you take Jesus and you uproot him from the Mediterranean basin, from Palestine, from Second Temple period Judaism. You transplant him to Oklahoma. He's suddenly not so beneficial anymore. You know, I think that everything is healthiest and works best in its ecosystem. And so I think if you're going to do a psychedelic and you're going to have that experience, the questions I want to ask is, do you need to do it every weekend? Or do it once? Is it serving just your individual optimization and healing and process, or it is about how you're serving your community? And is it grown in your community? And how can you honor that plant and its persistence and well-being in your ecosystem? So I'm like, I can see that it can be helpful in certain instances, and it can help with neurogenesis. Like I see that, but I also think it's been profoundly misused. I also think that its use with people who have survived sexual trauma has been very, very complicated, and its benefits have been very overstated, and its harms have been very covered up. And I know so many people with complex PTSD who have been through sexual violence who have been extraordinarily destabilized by psychedelics. And that's something I feel pretty powerfully angry about.
I agree with you. And a question comes up, and I don't even agree with this question, but to play devil's advocate, you know, I have heard stories of people going on these solo ayahuasca trips and it affecting somebody in their family in a very positive way. It's been this strange thing that happens where they're able to do the healing for their mother. And
I think,
and then it also comes back to, you know, if somebody is going at it for a once in a lifetime kind of life healing experience, does that not benefit the greater community because this person is now over their shit or over their trauma or seeing things in a new way to be a hopefully better person?
You know, I'm gonna walk to the side and tell one of my favorite Buddhist folktales, which is a woman comes to the Buddha and says, "My child has died. Will you please bring him back to life?" And he goes, "I will, when you can bring me a mustard seed from the house where no one has ever died." She goes on a long quest. And she comes back. She says, "I can't find the mustard seed." And he goes, "There's your answer." You know? And I say, bring me a mustard seed from the house of someone who did ayahuasca and had ego death and has lots to teach. I haven't met that person. I've met a lot of incredible manipulators, narcissists, people who practice coercive control, self-proclaimed gurus, coaches who have gotten a lot better at manipulating other people and using that experience as some kind of coin. The people I know who have the most medicine are sober people who've done AA, truck drivers who are part of NA, you know, people who've done humble, hard work that took 10 years. This idea that we can have ego death or confront our demons with one heroic journey, one heroic dose, I think really denies the hard, banal, boring work of confronting our demons and our shadows. That doesn't discount the miracles. And I do believe in miracles. And that there are individuals who go on pilgrimage, who go to Lourdes, who climb Everest, who do ayahuasca in the jungle, and they do it with purity of spirit, and the timing is perfect, and it changes their life. I think that happens. But I think that the norm is that people want this, they want to take the pill and feel better. They do take the pill, then they use it as a way of justifying their behavior that hasn't changed and oftentimes gets worse. And I'm very, you know, if you're a great individual and teacher and you never tell me about your ayahuasca trip, but it changed you and you're a great teacher, then I'll trust you. But if you're constantly telling me about how your ayahuasca trip is what made you into this healed individual, I'm profoundly skeptical.
Well said. So this brings me back to communicating with plants. So asking for plants or just communicating with the natural world, with things that don't speak to us in human language. How do you think, or at this point of your life, would you say that we could become more receptive to receiving those messages?
Well, I think actually my answer is about community and destigmifying. I don't know what the right word is, but stigmatifying. You can edit that out or you can keep it in because it's funny.
Releasing the stigma?
Yeah. Releasing the stigma around different ways of getting in touch with intuition and other beings. And for me, it's about, for the past, I guess, almost 8 years, done these storytelling gatherings where I get people together and I say, please share a story about some kind of intuitive, weird experience you had that you don't have an explanation for and that you're worried that if you tell it, it threatens to make you look mad or crazy. And when you get people in community, usually the first person has to be really brave. And usually people don't want to tell these stories. And then it breaks the water. And people are sharing tons of stories about receiving messages from their ancestors, plants talking to them, all sorts of weird stuff. As soon as one person says, this is okay, I believe in it, even though I don't have an explanation, permission someone else to do it. It's about creating new cultures, new communities where we can honor the ways that we live in a culture where we are laughed at if we say that we have dreams that we talk with plants or that we hug trees. And so it's about creating alternative nodes of connection and community where people actually acknowledge and honor those experiences. And for me, my favorite version of that is the potluck. People who gather, who share food and share stories. Super simple. But I also think in just being kinder with the ways that we, like keeping a journal, and it could be a journal or you could keep voice notes on your phone. There's no correct way of doing this, of just beginning to not discount your feelings. Like, do you get a weird feeling whenever you go to this place? What are your dreams? Is there an animal you keep noticing? Like, I always say, like, what you are paying attention to is paying attention to you. So the minute, I think, is when we start to slow down and amplify that level of attention and noticing, it happens more. It's like courtship. A courtship is oftentimes the language I use to describe this, which is we have not been wooing our primary lover for many, many years. And so they're a little mistrustful of us. They're still very generous and they send us bird song, they send us food and beautiful flowers, but they're not going to immediately accept our advances. So it takes our attention. It takes us showing up. It takes us not discounting these experiences for them to begin to amplify them. So I think that there's a mutuality with us and our environment. As we begin to honor and not discount these experiences, they also start to happen more. And then when we share about them in community and we're brave enough to do that, it permissions other people to notice and honor their own experiences.
Beautiful. I always say to new gardeners, there are a few things that I say, but observation is the biggest. Just go to the garden every day. But even if you're not going to do any work, touch a single thing, just go out there to observe, just to see what's going on, because you're going to learn so much by just observing.
What are your ways of knowing and communicating with the plants that you're working with?
a fun example that I documented in just a single Instagram reel. Last summer, I noticed that I had an artichoke plant that was becoming covered in aphids. Now, most people would be like, "Oh, there's a pest problem. There's a problem, right?
Yeah.
I need to do something. I need to intervene. I need to do something." I decided to observe, see what was going to happen, and I observed the aphids growing in a population. But then the next day, I observed a ladybug, and then I observed some more ladybugs, and ladybugs eat aphids. So after a short amount of time, some of the artichoke plants were completely cleaned of aphids because of the ladybugs. And so the aphids would move to a different plant and the ladybugs would follow. And then I started to observe little yellow eggs underneath the leaves. And these were ladybug eggs. And the only something that eats more aphids than ladybugs are ladybug larvae. So as soon as those ladybug eggs hatched, the larvae were just going to town, cleaned the aphids. The plants were completely fine. They thrived. And
That's an amazing story.
and it's so simple. It's just don't do anything. Just observe. And that's, another thing that I say is the garden can provide every metaphor you're ever going to need in life.
Yeah.
So yeah, just observe, just get out there and see what's being said. See how nature is handling itself.
Yeah. It's infinitely wiser than us.
Yeah. So your Substack is called Make Me Good Soil.
Yeah.
And another thing, so I get asked a lot of gardening advice. So observation is key. But one of the very first things I say to new gardeners is before you focus on growing vegetables or fruits or anything like that, focus on growing the soil, because that's where everything happens. That's where where your focus of life should be. I'm curious, knowing that the garden holds every metaphor, what does it mean to you to make good soil?
Oh, so many things. So the first thing is, I have a degenerative connective tissue disease with no cure as of right now. So I am in a process of breaking down. And that can make people really uncomfortable who need a wellness narrative, who need to feel like I'm getting better. But, I'm not. Things are slowly falling apart. And I can work with that and dance with that and strengthen other parts, but I'm not becoming better. And so I've had to get really intimate with decay and degeneration and how important that is to growth. That when you interrupt cycles of decay, things go really, really hectic. I always think about the Carboniferous period where there was all this woody matter. White rot had not yet developed to break down lignin. And you had all of this undigested matter swamp out life and the ability for other plants and biodiversity to flourish. And, it's that compacted vegetal matter that is fossil fuels fueling ecocide today. It's very interesting to me, that metaphor, speaking of metaphors. And so breaking things down and creating soil creates space for new life. That if we don't have decay and degeneration and rot and soil, we don't have the room to grow newness, new experiments and liveliness and relationship. And so soil for me is a tomb. It's where things go to break down and die, but it's a womb that grows and nourishes new life, makes room for new life. And so for me, I have tried to think about rot in my life as being a metaphor and a reality, which is one thing is, how do I make my life good food for other beings? How do I make myself edible? Soil is that which has been eaten and digested and reintegrated into a food web. Human beings are very good at creating waste, but not very good at stitching it back into appetites and food webs and figuring out how to make our waste digestible and reusable. And I think for me, soil is this, it is our greatest wealth. It is what nourishes us. It is what holds us, what breaks us down, which keeps us woven into the material reincarnation of the dynamic homeostasis of the biosphere. That if I pray to anything, it's to soil. I would love to become edible. I would love to be woven back into community. I also think for me, soil is a place that relishes in maximalism rather than minimalism and an antibiotic approach. We live in a culture of antibiotic gestures, that if we kill off things, sterilize things, make them clean, they'll work better. We've learned that's actually probably not true. A sterilized gut has dysbiosis, you get sick. The Christmas tree farm with only one species is much more vulnerable to blight. The places where you throw everything on the compost heap, where everything is touching inappropriately, places of maximalism, interdisciplinary practices where scientists and artists are working together. These are the places where new ideas sprout and new ecosystems flourish. And so metaphorically and practically. So for me, soil is this, it's like it's what I want to become. It's what I pray to. It's what I am made from. I'm soil punk. I guess it's kind of like my religion.
And so in your journey of all of your health problems, and I've just started your most recent book, which is intense. It's really intense to hear. And it's also very brave of you to make that public. And perhaps you explain this a lot more in the book, and I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm curious how nature has played a part in your healing, in your day-to-day grappling with the pain and reality that you're living in.
Yeah, I mean, that book is very much an ode to that question. Not an answering of it, but a living inside of it. I mean, I oftentimes think that our wounds are a doorway into the wounding of other beings. That when I was becoming obsessed with mycorrhizal fungi and their science at the exact time when I was diagnosed with degenerative genetic connective tissue disease. And it didn't seem coincidental that I was obsessed with the connective tissue of ecosystems and soil, and I had an absence or like a breakdown of connective tissue in my own body, that I couldn't solve it in my own body, but I could let myself be colonized metaphorically by the connective tissue of the world and become their emissary. And I think that oftentimes we can see suffering as becoming this kind of solipsistic loop of feeling like, woe is me, I'm the person suffering. No one understands how bad it is. And I always want to say that, like, when you have a problem that can't be fixed, it doesn't have a pill or an easy answer, it's oftentimes the exact shape of some other being's suffering. It is an invitation into relationship. That I think in our culture, to be well is sometimes to be isolated. It means that you don't need help and you don't need relationships. To be disabled, to be sick, is to need to depend on other beings, to realize that you need medicine, you need your neighbors, you need your family. Even if your family is not great, even if your neighbors have different political ideologies, even if the medicine is created in complicated ways, ties you into more complex ontologies. Like, there's no purity when you're sick and disabled. You have to understand that you are kept alive in all of these complicated ways. And that is ecological to me, that there is no purity, that there's, microplastics threaded through our blood. There's, blood pressure stabilizers in our rivers. We're never getting this stuff out. We're going to have to learn how to collaborate with it, how to be like oyster mushrooms that learn how to digest cigarette butts and like grow towards the radiation in Chernobyl. That this is perhaps our imperative right now, is to learn to get better at collaborating with all of this impurity. And for me, our environments are suffering, and it doesn't surprise me that we're suffering too. that if we're anxious, I think, of course, our whole nervous system, our whole biosphere nervous system is out of alignment and struggling to come back into regulation. Of course, these tiny little beings living inside that giant nervous system are anxious. Why pathologize that anxiety as being wrong rather than saying like, wow, that might be like exactly the normal response to our situation? So for me, it's understanding myself as being in ecology comes from the word oikos for household. Understanding my suffering as being part and parcel of a wider systemic ecological breakdown it hasn't fixed me, but it has helped me. And I also think, my relationships with animals, with other species are so much wilder and fiercer than spending hundreds of dollars on boutique therapies that are unproven and don't end up working. That, when my aunt died in December, really, really suddenly, like, I didn't think that there was a single human being that could hold how bad I felt and how little I felt like it made sense, except the Ashokan Reservoir. This area, this giant blasted piece of land that has been where towns and valleys were flooded through with the redirected Esopus Creek. Like, I was like, that land. If I go there, that is a big enough patch of land that has known real violence that can hold this feeling for me. Like, for me, we evolved in footstep, in concert, in photonegative with these ecosystems. Our hands are a photonegative of ancient grasslands. Our bodies are love songs to ghost landscapes and to trees and plants and smells that are still alive today. And when we need medicine and we need nourishment and feelings of resonance, that we can go to our puzzle piece, our photonegative lover in the land. It's not an answer. It's not a pill. For me, I'm much more interested in healing as being about my level of connectivity, my level of joy and relationality, that I might be at death's door and totally healthy because I'm filled with joy and have so many incredibly dynamic relationships. And so I'm always trying to problematize healing as being a destination, as being an optimized or a well body. What is a well body? What is a normal body? Yeah. And so nature is very good at showing me that survival is not about wellness or wholeness. It's about scrappiness, and it's about collaboration and symbiosis.
And that makes me think of so much that we've talked about. This brings me back to dreams. And actually, one of the very first things you said is you mentioned the blue heron.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of my messengers, I think, which initially came in a dream many years ago. And it was a powerful dream where I was visited by a friend who's passed away. And she came to me. My life was about to change in a way, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I was about to be leaving something. And she came to me in a dream and pointed to the sky, and blue heron flew past. And there was a message written in the clouds, but I can't remember the message. But the message that I took away was the blue heron.
Yeah.
And so nearly every time I've set out on a new journey, a blue heron will go across my path. And to me, it's this great sign that, okay, I'm on the right path.
Right?
Or even if I'm not on the right path, I'm being protected. Something else is there with me. And that's a beautiful way to connect with nature, to connect with ourselves, asking for those signs, looking, or at least being able to pay attention to the signs that are given us.
Yeah.
Recognizing them.
And they're beings that we live under the zodiac of a certain being for a certain time. Like, there was a period of my life where woodchucks were coming to me all the time. Like that they were there to teach me. And then they're still part of my pantheon. They're part of my divinity team. But there was a period of time where they were really instructing me. They were my mentors. And it's nice to also notice these different seasons of beings coming in to teach us something.
What is one of your favorite food memories?
Oh my God. Well, as someone who has only like 3 safe foods and hasn't been able to like eat anything for years,
I've recognized that after.
No, it's interesting. I think this is going to be such a strange answer, but I remember there's so many delicacies and beautiful baked goods and things that I used to make, and rice pudding that I ate with my English grandmother, I could say. But I actually think my favorite food memory is the combination of a local wild, like some apple from a local orchard. I think my family had gone like apple picking, sliced. And I was sitting on my back porch in my parents' house in their yard outside of Woodstock. And it was a windy, windy day, and some sharp cheddar cheese. And I had slices of apple and sharp cheddar cheese. And those combination of tastes was just perfect. But it was also like being outside, the movement into cold, delicious. Loved it. I think it's one of my favorite memories of eating anything.
Beautiful. So simple.
Yeah, simple but perfect.
Gardens of Earthly Delight is currently a one-man show, produced and hosted by myself, Andrew Valenti. All the music you heard in this episode is by Constant Smiles, including the theme song titled Time Measured in Moonflowers. The Gardens of Earthly Delight logo is designed by Hunky Kitty. All relevant links to this episode can be found in the show notes and on our website, gardensofearthlydelight.com. Please show your support by leaving a 5-star review, subscribing, and sharing this podcast far and wide. You can also subscribe to our Substack, where you can get exclusive content and bonus material that didn't make it into the final cut. Our social media is at Gardens of Earthly Delight Pod, and you can find me at andrewvalenti.av. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.